My name is Anissa. I am 18 years old, and on New Year's Day, 2026, at exactly 12:15 in the morning, while champagne glasses were still clinking and fireworks were still echoing outside, I heard my mom say the words that would change everything as she raised her glass and smiled at my dad and said, "You know what, this year we focus on us, no more putting everyone else first. This is our year." And my dad laughed and clinked his glass against hers and said, "Finally," and they both looked so happy, so relieved, like they had just solved some terrible problem. And I stood there in the kitchen doorway, invisible as always, and realized with perfect clarity that everyone else meant me. I had just turned 18 3 hours earlier at 9 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and nobody remembered, not my mom, not my dad, not my older brother Kyle, who was away at college and did not even bother to text. And the only birthday acknowledgement I got was a generic card my mom left on the kitchen counter that morning that said, "Happy birthday, hope your day is special, love, Mom and Dad," except the card was still in the envelope, which meant she had not even bothered to sign it. She had just bought it and left it there, like checking a box on a to-do list. So when I heard her say, "This year we focus on us," I understood exactly what that meant. It meant no more pretending I mattered, no more fake smiles, no more going through the motions. It meant they were finally saying out loud what they had been showing me for years, that I was the obligation they were ready to be free from, and standing there, listening to them laugh and toast to their freedom from me, something inside me did not break. It hardened into something cold and clear, and I thought, if you want to focus on yourselves without me, then let me make that incredibly easy for you. I went upstairs to my room and I sat on my bed and I opened my laptop and I started making a list of every single way I was connected to them, and it was a longer list than I expected. I was on their car insurance, their health insurance, their phone plan, their Amazon account, their Costco membership. I had access to their Netflix, their Hulu, their Spotify. I used their credit card for gas and groceries. I was listed as an emergency contact for my grandmother. I babysat my cousin's kids every weekend for free because my aunt would call my mom and my mom would volunteer me without asking. I did all the grocery shopping because my mom hated it. I picked up my dad's prescriptions. I scheduled everyone's doctor appointments. I was the one who remembered birthdays and bought gifts and signed cards for the whole family. I stared at that list and realized with a shock that I was not just the kid they were tired of. I was unpaid labor. I was the administrative assistant, the personal shopper, the babysitter, the errand runner, the person who kept their lives organized, while they took credit for being such great parents. And I thought, if they want to focus on us without me, let them see what us actually looks like when I am gone. That night I did not sleep, spent hours researching, and by morning I had a plan. And on January 1st, 2026, while my parents were sleeping off their champagne hangovers, I started disappearing. And I did it quietly, methodically, completely. And I started with the phone. I called our provider and asked to be removed from the family plan and moved to my own account. And the representative said, "You will need the account holder's permission if you are under 18. And I said calmly, "I turned 18 yesterday." And she said, "Oh, well then, happy birthday. You can absolutely start your own account." I transferred my number, paid the activation fee with money I had saved from my part-time job at the library, and just like that, I was no longer reachable on their bill. I did not tell them. I just let my phone go silent on their end, and then I logged into the car insurance portal using the password my mom kept on a sticky note in her desk drawer, and I submitted a request to be removed from the policy, effective immediately, with a note that said, "I am 18 and will be obtaining my own coverage. Thank you." And I knew that would trigger a notification, but I did not care. Let them get the email, let them wonder. Next, I went to the bank. I had a joint account with my mom that she had opened when I was 16 so she could deposit my allowance, except the allowance stopped when I turned 17, and she said, "You have a job now, you do not need us to give you money anymore." But she kept her name on the account, which meant she could see every purchase I made, and twice she had taken money out without asking to cover things she said were family expenses. So I walked into the bank that morning and I said, "I want to close this account and open a new one in only my name." The banker looked at my ID and said, "You are 18 as of yesterday. Happy birthday." And I said, Thank you, can we do this now? And she said, absolutely, and within 30 minutes, every dollar I had ever earned was in an account only I could access, and my mom's name was nowhere on it, and I felt this rush of power like I had just taken back something that had always been mine but had been held hostage, and I transferred my direct deposit from work to the new account, and I took the debit card tied to the old joint account, and I cut it into pieces and left them on the kitchen counter where my mom would find them. When my parents finally woke up around noon, my mom came downstairs and saw the cut-up card on the counter, and she picked up the pieces with a confused look and said, "Emma, what is this?" And I said calmly, "I closed our joint account. I have my own now." And she blinked and said, "What do you mean? Your own account?" And I said, "Exactly what it sounds like. I am 18. Now I do not need a joint account anymore." And she stared at me and said, "Well, you could have discussed this with us. First, this feels very sudden." Sudden, I repeated, and I smiled this smile that did not reach my eyes and said, "You are right, I should have discussed it last night when you toasted to focusing on yourselves this year, but I did not want to interrupt your celebration." And her face went pale and she stammered, "Emma, that is not, we did not mean," and I cut her off gently and said, "It is fine. Really, I understand you want to focus on you, so I am just making sure I am not in the way anymore." And I walked out of the kitchen before she could respond. Over the next week, I continued disappearing piece by piece. I removed myself from every shared streaming account, every membership, every subscription. And when my mom asked why Netflix was asking her to sign in again, I said, "Oh, I took myself off the account since you are focusing on you this year. I figured you did not want to pay for my profile anymore." And she said, "Emma, stop being ridiculous. We never said you had to leave." And I said calmly, "You said you wanted to focus on yourselves. I am just respecting that." I stopped doing the grocery shopping. So when my dad opened the fridge on day 4 and found it nearly empty, he said, "Emma, did you go to the store this week?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, can you go today? We are out of everything." And I said, "I do not think so." And he stared at me confused and said, "What do you mean you do not think so?" And I said, "I mean, I have been doing the shopping every week for 3 years without being asked and without being thanked. And since you are focusing on yourselves this year, I assumed you would handle it yourselves." And he looked genuinely shocked, like it had never occurred to him that someone had to actually buy the food that appeared in the fridge. I stopped picking up prescriptions, stopped scheduling appointments, stopped answering when my aunt called to ask if I could babysit. And when my mom said, "Emma, your aunt needs you this weekend," I said, "I am not available anymore." And she said, "What do you mean not available? You never have plans." And I said, "That is true. I never had plans because you always volunteered me without asking, but I am 18 now and my time is my own, and if Aunt Jessica needs a babysitter, she can hire one." By week 2, my parents were starting to panic because all the invisible work I had been doing for years was suddenly not getting done, and their carefully organized life was falling apart. And my mom sat me down at the kitchen table with this forced calm expression and said, "Emma, I do not know what has gotten into you lately, but this attitude needs to stop." And I said, "What attitude?" And she said, "This whole 'I am disappearing' thing. You are being dramatic." And I said, "I am not being dramatic. I'm doing exactly what you wanted. I am letting you focus on yourselves." She looked at me with frustration and said, "We never said we did not want you here." And I pulled out my phone and I played a video. I had recorded that night a video I took from the kitchen doorway of her raising her glass and saying, "This year we focus on us no more, putting everyone else first." And her face went white as she watched herself say those words. And I said, "You did not say you did not want me here, but you also did not include me when you said us, so I'm just making it easier for you." My dad walked in during this and said, "What is going on?" And my mom said she recorded us on New Year's, and my dad said, "So what, we were just talking, and I said you were toasting to freedom from me." And he said, "Emma, that is not what we meant." And I said, "Then what did you mean?" And he opened his mouth and closed it and opened it again, and nothing came out because he could not explain it away. He could not rewrite what I had heard and seen and recorded. That is when I told them, I said, "I have removed myself from your phone, plan, your car, insurance, your bank accounts, your streaming services, your memberships. I am not doing your shopping or your errands or your scheduling. Anymore, I'm not babysitting. For free, I am not organizing your lives. You wanted to focus on yourselves, so focus on yourselves. I will focus on me and my mom's. Eyes filled with tears, and she said, "You are our daughter. You are part of this family." And I said, "Funny, I have not felt like part of this family in years. I have felt like unpaid staff." The next few weeks were chaos. My parents had to figure out how to run their own lives without me, and it turned out they had no idea how much I actually did. My dad missed 2 doctor appointments because nobody reminded him. My mom overdrew her bank account because she forgot to pay a bill I always handled. My brother called from college complaining that nobody had sent him the care package he expected because I was always the one who packed and mailed it. And when my parents tried to guilt me into coming back, into helping out, into being their invisible support system again, I said no. I got my own apartment, a tiny studio across town, using the money I'd saved, and my parents did not even know I had that much saved because they never asked, they never cared. And when I told them I was moving out, my mom cried and said, "You are abandoning us." And I said, "No, I am doing what you wanted. I am letting you focus on you." And she said, "We never wanted this." And I said, "Maybe you should have thought about that before you toasted to a year without putting everyone else first." On moving day, I packed everything I owned into my car, and I left my house key on the kitchen counter next to a note that said, "Thank you for teaching me that I am only valuable when I am useful. I have learned that lesson. Well, I hope your year of focusing on yourselves is everything you wanted it to be. Love, Emma." And I drove away, and I did not look back. Months later, my mom called me crying, saying they missed me, saying they were sorry, saying they did not realize how much I did for them. And I said, "I know you did not realize because you never saw me." And she said, "Please come home. We will do better." And I said, "I am not coming back, but maybe we can start over. Maybe we can build something new where I am not your assistant. I am your daughter." And she said, "Yes, okay, yes, anything." And I said, "We will see." Because revenge is not always about burning bridges. Sometimes it is about finally putting yourself first. Sometimes it is about disappearing so completely that the people who took you for granted finally understand what they lost. And when my mom said, "This year we focus on us," she thought she was celebrating freedom, but what she actually did was set me free. So tell me if your family ever made you feel like you were the burden they wanted to be rid of. Would you stay and keep helping? Or would you do what I did and disappear so completely they finally understood what they had